Alright, so welcome to another video on the Mariner Biology YouTube channel. This one's about digestion, so let's get started. Alright, so you're welcome to take notes. We did take some notes in class. Our big question here is why do we eat? Right? There's three big reasons why we eat. One is to get energy, and the second one is to get essential nutrients, and those are nutrients that your body can't make itself from other things. And then the third thing is to get building blocks from your food, so you can, like, you take the proteins and you digest the proteins and you break them down into amino acids, and then the amino acids are absorbed and your cells use those to build more proteins. So we can't build the large molecules. We need these macromolecules unless we have the building blocks. And so just as a quick review, right, here's a list of the macromolecules we studied in class a couple weeks ago, right, and then an example, going back to the building blocks again, right, an example of those building blocks is what we use to put proteins together, which are amino acids, right, so that's what we mean by building blocks. Okay, so next question, what's the name of the system we use, right? How do we take in and break down and absorb our food and then eliminate what we can't digest? That's right. It's the digestive system. And we're going to look in more detail at the structures in the digestive system, but what we want to do first is look at the 4 stages, how the food that we take in actually gets processed. Alright, so there's 4 stages, and the first one's ingestion. Okay, and the second one is digestion, and we'll talk about what ingestion and digestion are now. So ingestion is just the act of taking in food. Okay, so you put food in your mouth, done with ingestion. Good job. All right, different animals are going to obviously ingest in different ways. Bacteria doesn't have a mouth. A plant, well, let's not go with plants because plants don't have digestive systems, so scratch that. Okay, so then digestion is where you're actually breaking down the food. And this actually starts outside your body, right? When you chop your food, when you cook your food, you're starting to break it down. And that gives you better access to the energy stored in the food, the nutrients stored in the food, and those building blocks that are stored in the food. Okay, so again, we're just breaking it down. And then once it's all broken down to its smallest bits, right, we take these macromolecules, these large polymers, and we need to break them down into their monomers, right? And remember, the name of the reaction that we use to do that is hydrolysis, where we have to split a water molecule and break the bonds, the covalent bonds between the building blocks of the macromolecules, and break them down into a form that's easily absorbed, right? So it's got to be small. You can't absorb a whole hamburger across your small intestine. That would hurt. Okay, so when we absorb, we're moving those monomers into the bloodstream. All right, and then finally, we're going to eliminate. So there's going to be some stuff that we just can't digest. We need that stuff because it helps kind of sweep our intestines and keep them clean. All right, so but what we can't absorb, or what we can't digest, is going to get eliminated. Alrighty, so now what we're going to do is look at the types of digestion. Okay, so we're in the specific stage of the food processing that you're going to do using your digestive system. Okay, so the first one's mechanical, right? So anytime you're grinding, you're chewing, you're mixing, you're churning, whatever you're doing, any kind of non-specific breakdown of the food and digestion is going to be called mechanical. We also have a worksheet that referred to this kind of digestion as physical. Fine, you can use either term, just make sure you're aware of both. Okay, so here's some examples again of what those things are. And then the chemical, right? Our digestive system has all these what we call accessory organs associated with it. And those accessory organs are going to secrete a bunch of different types of chemicals. They're going to secrete hydrochloric acid. They're going to secrete, and those are actually, the hydrochloric acid is actually secreted by specific cells lining your stomach. Okay, but in your mouth you got your salivary glands that are going to release saliva, and inside that saliva are the enzymes that can break down certain carbohydrates like starch and glycogen. Okay, so there's enzymes, and the bicarbonate's important because when we take the stuff from our stomach and we put it in our small intestine, it's really acidic in our stomach. Stomach's built to take that acidity, be able to deal with that acidity, but your small intestine's not. So we have to mix it with bicarbonate, sodium bicarbonate. You have this. You probably have this at home in your cupboard. This baking soda, right? So basically, your pancreas is making this bicarbonate, and it mixes with the acid chyme coming from your stomach, and it increases the pH, right, making it less acidic, so you don't get ulcers in your small intestine, and that's good. Okay, so let's keep going here. So let's talk about what nutrients means. And when we refer to nutrients, we're talking about essential nutrients. And essential nutrients, I said it earlier, essential nutrients are nutrients that you can't make yourself, okay, from other things that you're getting in your diet. Okay, and we're going to look at some examples. Okay, so I'll give you the definition here of what an essential nutrient is. All right, and again, the reason that they need to be in your food is because you can't make them yourself. You have to have these things in your diet. And if you don't get these things in your diet, we say that you are malnourished. So remember, you can eat a bunch of calories and get all the energy you need, but you're not going to get all the nutrients you need. Okay, so you can actually be overnourished. You can be obese, but you can be obese and overnourished, and you can also be malnourished at the same time if you're not eating a balanced diet. All right, so now we're going to look at examples of essential nutrients. Okay, and there's 4. I'll give you a second to think of them before I give them to you. All right, and again, these are things that you can't make yourself. And we'll just bring them up here for you. So we got minerals, essential vitamins, essential fatty acids, and essential amino acids. Okay, so we're going to spend some time on amino acids and the essential ones. Okay, so before we answer this question, let's think about the different types of essential nutrients. So minerals, things like magnesium, iron, calcium, just all these things that you need to have to have your body function the way it needs to. You can think about what kinds of things these minerals are used for. I'll let you do that on your own. Okay, and then there's vitamins that are important for all kinds of things. We make other molecules from vitamins, so if we don't have those vitamins, we can't make those other molecules. Right, and there's essential fatty acids. There's one called linoleic acid, where you can't do a good job of building your cell membranes unless this fatty acid is in your diet. So, and cell membranes are kind of important. I'm being sarcastic. They're very important. All right, so let's spend some time on the amino acids. So, again, how many amino acids are found in living things? We talked about this. Everybody seemed like they knew it. It was 20. So living things use 20 different amino acids. Okay. And once we're adults, we can actually make 12 of these. So if you do the math, right, 20 total that we need, 12 we can make ourselves from other things that we get in our diet. That means there's 8 that we have to have in our diet. Okay, some people say 9, and the reason they say 9 is because infants, there's a 9th one that infants can't make. But once you grow up a little bit and become a toddler and child and adolescent, you'll be able to make this this other amino acid by yourself. So once you're at the age you currently are, right, then there's 8 amino acids that you need to get from your diet. Those are what we call essential. Okay, and should be pretty clear here. The ones we can't make, we get from our food. Right? So again, if you don't eat a balanced diet, there's a good chance you're not going to get all the essential amino acids you need. And if you don't get all the amino acids you need, you can't make proteins correctly. And if you can't make proteins correctly, then your body's not going to work right. Right? Because the proteins are the molecules that do all the work in your body. We call them workhorses of the cells. Okay, so I think we've covered that. and now we're going to start to look at some structures. Okay, so our next slide is going to do a good job of this. So what we're looking at here is a kind of a general view of the digestive system. Obviously a mouth doesn't look like that, but this is a good diagram because it's simple and you can see that it's all basically one tube from your mouth to your anus, which is the end of your colon, right, the end of your large intestine. So let's go through each of these. So the mouth is where we do ingestion, and there's physical or mechanical digestion, and there's also chemical digestion going on there, right, because we have saliva that's being secreted by the salivary gland, and inside that saliva are enzymes that break down certain kinds of carbohydrates, like starch and glycogen. Okay, on your left, we're labeling the entire tube from your mouth to the end, your anus, and that's the alimentary canal. That's how we refer to that entire long tube that runs from start to finish. Okay? So then we'll go back up. We're talking about the salivary gland, and in the salivary gland we release saliva, and inside that saliva there's enzymes, and there's some other stuff too. Then we've got the esophagus, right? And the esophagus transports food from your mouth to your stomach. That's the only thing it does, and it does it because your entire digestive system, your entire alimentary canal, is lined with smooth muscle, and it's involuntary, and it contracts and it pushes food in one direction, which is a good thing. Okay, and that wave-like motion of your intestinal walls from the esophagus on down, it's called peristalsis. Okay, so in the stomach there's all kinds of cool stuff going on. Acids being released, some enzymes are being released that break down protein. So this is where protein digestion starts in your stomach. Okay, and that's definitely mechanical because the stomach's a big, thick, muscular wall, and it does a lot of churning and mixing, and the acids break down the food that's in there that's been chewed. Remember, once you chew food in your mouth and mix it with saliva and some mucus, then it becomes this thing called a bolus that ends up in your stomach. Okay, once the bolus has been mixed with all the juices in the stomach, then that becomes what we call acid chyme, and that's what's going to get dumped into the small intestine. Okay, on your left, those here's what we got. Here's what we call our accessory glands, and the salivary glands are also lumped in with this group. So we've got the liver, and that produces bile, and the liver does a bunch of other stuff, which we'll talk about later, not in this video. Then you've got the gallbladder, which stores the bile. Okay, and then you've got the pancreas, and the pancreas is hugely important to digestion, right? The pancreas is what's cranking out all these enzymes that get secreted or deposited in your small intestine, and they're going to eventually break everything down that's left to break down into its monomers, right? The amino acids, the monosaccharides, the fatty acids, and the nucleotides of DNA and RNA. All that stuff needs to be broken down so it's small enough, and it's the digestive enzymes from the pancreas that do that. And then the pancreas also releases bicarbonate to make sure that we're not burning holes in our small intestine like we talked about earlier. Okay? So there's small intestine, we talked about what it does, and that's for absorption, right? And then we got the large intestine, which is responsible for pulling out the last of the water from whatever food is left. Whatever's left that hasn't been absorbed by the small intestine, large intestine pulls out some water, and it also houses these bacteria called E. coli. Now these are the good bacteria. These are the bacteria that we want, right? There's also bad E. coli that get you really sick, can cause diarrhea and stuff like that. But the good E. coli, what they do is they feed on the stuff that we can't digest, and they actually release some vitamins that we can also absorb across the large intestine. All right, and then at the very end down there is the rectum, which is where whatever's left now is called feces. And I'm sorry, I didn't close my parentheses there. And so the feces get stored there, and then when you're ready, you will eliminate the feces, right? And all along the way at the anus and the borders between the esophagus and the stomach and the small intestine, there's these things called sphincters. and what they do is they're like little muscular rings, and they help prevent stuff moving in the wrong direction. Alright, so we got one more slide here, and we're going to look at the closer view of the small intestine. Okay, so what you see, right, you see a big view of the small intestine, and the small intestine you can see is lined with smooth muscle, and then the inside open part of the small intestine is what we call the lumen. And so these green dots that you see are, we're going to say those are carbohydrates that have been broken down, and we're going to call those, just an example, we're going to say those are maltose. Right, so that's a disaccharide. It's made of 2 glucoses. And the little blue dots are enzymes called maltase that's going to break down the maltose. Okay, so let's watch that happen, see what happens. Alright, and then what you end up with is those two, you're going to get into more than that. All those maltoses, the green ones, are going to get broken up into 2 glucoses each. Right, so you have 4 green ones, so you'd have 8 of the glucoses. And it's the enzyme maltase that does that. Right? Remember, enzymes are reused, so we don't need to litter the small intestine with a bunch of maltase molecules, because they can be used over and over again. Alright, so what's going to happen now is those glucoses, those monomers, the monosaccharides, are small enough to be absorbed across the lining of the small intestine. So let's take a closer look at the lining of the small intestine. Okay, I'll just label those. You got your glucose. Alright, and then we got glucose again up here. We're looking at this bigger version. Alright, now these finger-like projections that line the small intestine are called villi. Alright, and what's going to happen is the glucose is going to move across the border of an individual villus and make its way into, it's going to go through the cells, and it's going to make its way into the capillaries that are surrounding that yellow thing. Okay, that yellow thing is called a lacteal, and what the lacteal does is that any fats that you break down eventually get broken down into fatty acids, and those fatty acids make their way into that lacteal, which goes into your lymphatic system and eventually takes all the fat back to your heart. Okay, or the fatty acids back to your heart, and then your body will use those for whatever it needs to use them for. Okay, so that's that, and then now we'll take an even closer view. So now we're looking at the wall of one villi on your right, or villus, I should say, and you'll see those are individual cells, and they have finger-like projections coming off of them. Those are called microvilli. So we're getting these folds on top of folds on top of folds, and what they do is they increase the surface area. Right, they're giving you more of a surface area to absorb all these nutrients that you need, and all these building blocks, and all these molecules you're going to use for energy. So the purple dot that I've drawn on the outside is that glucose again, right? So the glucose gets absorbed into one of the cells lining the small intestine, lining a villus, right? So it gets absorbed, and then it shows up inside, and then it passes through, and that glucose now is going to make its way into the capillary, and the capillary is going to take it to the liver, and it's going to get processed, and then it's going to get taken off to the body wherever it needs to go. Alright, so I believe that's it. That's your kind of long video about digestion, but we covered it all. So I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot.